8. German submarine U-471. Built during the early 1940s for Nazi Germany's Kriegsmarine, German submarine U-471 entered active service in 1943. In 1944, the 220-foot vessel was relocated to the Mediterranean, where it failed to complete its missions to sink Allied ships throughout its next 3 patrols. As uneventful as U-471's career may sound, the submarine participated in 6 coordinated attacks on Allied convoys known as wolf packs. This strategy initially proved to be extremely threatening to the Allies, who developed effective responses to wolf packs over time. US forces sank U-471 in the French military port of Toulon in August 1944. After the war, the French Navy raised the captured U-boat and renamed it the Millet. It remained in service until 1963, when it was retired and struck from the Naval Register. 7. Operation Ivy Bells. As the Cold War gained momentum during the early 1970s, American intelligence officials wanted to learn more about Soviet submarine and missile technology. After learning about the existence of an undersea communications cable in the Sea of Okhotsk, the US Navy, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency undertook a joint mission to tap it. But in order to do so, they had to figure out a way to bypass the multitude of sound detection devices that the Soviets had installed in order to detect the presence of intruders. Codenamed Operation Ivy Bells, the top-secret mission commenced in October 1971. To prevent the project from being discovered, the government funded the mission by secretly diverting funds from another project. After being modified specifically for the mission, a submarine called the USS Halibut snuck into the Sea of Okhotsk. Divers located the cable in 400 feet of water and very carefully installed a large recording and listening device to it. The device was designed to detach from the cable if it was raised for repairs. To maintain its cover story, the military claimed that it entered the Sea of Okhotsk to recover debris from the destroyed Soviet SSN-12 Sandbox Supersonic Anti-Ship Missile, or ASHM, for the sake of developing countermeasures. Teams were actually sent to do this, and they did so with a high rate of success. More than 2 million pieces of debris were taken to the US Naval Research Laboratory, where they were painstakingly put back together. Every month, divers retrieved the recordings from the listening device and attached new tapes. The recordings were handed over to NSA personnel, who soon discovered through listening to the conversations the cable picked up that the Soviets were supremely confident in its security. But the operation came crashing down after an NSA veteran named Ronald Pelton sold information about the tapped cable to the KGB in an effort to repair his ravaged personal finances. The Soviets retrieved the listening device, which has been on display at the Great Patriotic War Museum in Moscow since 1999. 6. The USS Seawolf. After seeing a great success with wiretapping a Soviet undersea cable as part of Operation Ivy Bells, the US government went ahead and tapped several more Soviet cables throughout the remaining decades of the Cold War. By the time the 337-foot USS Seawolf was sent to tap a cable in the Sea of Okhotsk in 1981, the submarine was so old that its crew's morale was dragging. Crew members were so sick of maintaining the aging vessel that it's believed they recreationally used marijuana between missions in an attempt to make themselves ineligible for duty. While attempting to install a listening device on the cable, the sub encountered a severe typhoon. The storm was so extreme that even at extreme depths, the Seawolf was unable to escape its force. It became embedded in the seabed, causing a part called the reactor heat exchanger to become clogged with sand. While fighting to free itself from the sea bottom, the vessel ripped free from part of its underbelly, leaving interior parts free to clank around and bang against the hull. It made enough noise for the Soviets to detect the Seawolf's presence, but the submarine luckily managed to limp into international waters and back to its home port. It received the Navy Expeditionary Medal for its service in the mission. Mechanically speaking, the vessel was on its last leg, but it was fixed up and sent on another handful of deployments before finally being decommissioned in 1987. It was dismantled and scrapped a decade later. 5. Hitler's mini-subs. As it became increasingly clear that Germany was losing World War II, Hitler resorted to the development of midget submarines in a last-ditch effort to maintain the Kriegsmarine's diminishing naval presence. These lightweight units were built mainly for espionage and to carry out local objectives, and they were each equipped with 1 or 2 torpedoes in case the opportunity to sink an Allied ship came along. Various different types of these so-called pocket submersibles were designed, including a one-man sub called the Mulch, as well as the one-person Biber submarine. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of these vessels isn't the submarines themselves, but the fact that their pilots were given drugs in order to operate them effectively. With no fellow crew members to help carry out missions, which generally lasted from 1 to 2 days, pilots were on their own. To stay awake and alert, they ate caffeine-laced chocolate and took an experimental drug called DIX, which came in the form of chewing gum laced with a combination of oxycodone, cocaine, and methamphetamine. German doctors praised the drug as a revolutionary performance enhancer, and plans were made to distribute it to the entire military. But the war ended before that could happen, and thankfully the Allies never had to go up against an enemy that was high on meth. Do you think it sounds necessary, and perhaps even smart, for a military to use performance-enhancing drugs, or is it downright dangerous? Let us know in the comments below, but be sure to subscribe first. 4. Australia's Cold War submarine missions. From 1978 to 1992, the Australian Royal Navy carried out 16 top-secret submarine spy missions in the waters of Southeast Asia and the Soviet Union. These clandestine surveillance operations were kept so tightly under wraps that even some of the country's top-ranking government officials were kept in the dark about them. They were carried out using the Royal Navy's 6 Oberon-class diesel-electric-powered submarines, or O-boats, which saw extensive use throughout the Cold War. The missions focused primarily on Chinese and Soviet warships, as well as Soviet-built Indian Navy ships. They also operated in the waters of Vietnam and Indonesia. The subs lurked deep below the surface, where their crews waited for passing Soviet vessels. They then followed closely behind the ships and snapped photos while being extremely careful not to crash or have their presence detected. Australia's Prime Ministers, Defence Ministers, the Chief of the Australian Defence Force, and a handful of other high-ranking defence personnel were the only people authorised to know about the surveillance activities. When one of the submarines got caught in a fishing net and had to surface in the South China Sea so that crew members could cut the vessel free, Prime Minister Paul Keating's Defence Minister put an end to the RAN's most dangerous operation. The sub had come alarmingly close to being detected, at which point those in charge changed their minds about the risks being worth the rewards. Less than 10 crew members knew their O-boat's exact location at any given time, according to journalist Jeffrey Barker, who covered the secretive patrols in depth in 2003 for the Australian Financial Review magazine. In the meantime, they adjusted to the cramped conditions of life on board a submarine, which came with the unpleasant smells of diesel and sweat. In a practice known as hot bunking, multiple sailors shared a bunk and slept in shifts. The crews that operated the top-secret submarines were among Australia's toughest and most skilled seafarers of the day. They put their lives on the line to carry out complicated and dangerous patrols and gathered valuable information amid growing concerns over the expanding Soviet naval fleet. Yet, the government refused to acknowledge their service as warlike and denied active service medals to veterans. It was during their attempts to achieve widespread recognition in recent years that widespread knowledge of the highly secretive missions finally emerged. To this day, nobody seems to know exactly why the RAN embarked on such high-risk operations. Some former O-boat commanders have speculated that Australia wanted to establish credibility in the eyes of the US and the United Kingdom for its intelligence-gathering capabilities. Others have claimed that the patrols were carried out at the request of the United States. But those who were involved have only disclosed limited details about their work, often citing ongoing security concerns related to modern submarines that continue to carry out sensitive missions. 3. Operation Pastorius. Taking over the United States was a major part of Adolf Hitler's plan for world domination. Hoping to seize control of the country from the inside, he targeted factories, transit facilities, and other sites of economic importance, including hydroelectric plants at Niagara Falls, numerous aluminium plants, the Horseshoe Curve Railroad Pass in Pennsylvania, and Hell Gate Bridge in New York. In a mission codenamed Operation Pastorius, 8 agents received fake IDs and $175,000 in cash, along with instructions to blow up the specified targets. They traveled to the American East Coast in June of 1942 in a pair of U-boats, one of which landed at Amagansett in New York. The agents then took a train into Manhattan via the Long Island Railroad, while the other party landed in Jacksonville, Florida. By then, authorities had found out about the plot, and a manhunt was well underway. In the meantime, agents George Dash and Ernst Berger, who'd both landed in New York, talked and agreed that they'd agreed to the mission because they disagreed with Nazism and wanted to defect to the US. The pair turned themselves in to the FBI, and the other 6 conspirators were captured shortly thereafter. Their claims that they wanted to escape Nazi Germany were met with enough skepticism for Berger to receive a life sentence, while Dash was sentenced to 30 years behind bars. The remaining 6 agents were executed in the electric chair just weeks after being caught. 2. Jonathan and Diana Tobay. Not all submarine-related espionage occurs underwater, as one recent case proved. In October 2021, the US Department of Justice announced the arrest of a nuclear naval engineer named Jonathan Tobay and his wife Diana Tobay, who were accused of trying to sell some of America's most closely guarded submarine secrets to a foreign country. According to a probable cause affidavit, the couple reached out to a certain country, later identified by other sources as Brazil, and offered to sell secrets about nuclear submarine reactors in exchange for cryptocurrency. They proceeded to repeatedly pass on top-secret information to the unnamed foreign country in violation of the Atomic Energy Act. Altogether, the couple made $100,000, more than half of which has been recovered by the government. The pair initially pleaded not guilty to 1 count each of conspiracy to communicate restricted data and 2 counts of communication of restricted data. Jonathan Tobay took a deal and pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to communicate restricted data. He was sentenced to 19 years and 4 months in federal prison and was fined $45,700. Diana also took a plea agreement and was sentenced to 21 years and 10 months in prison and was ordered to pay a $50,000 fine. The sentence was much higher than the recommended term of 36 months, mainly because she was caught writing to Jonathan in prison and urging him to take entire responsibility for the espionage. 1. Project Aoran. In April 1968, a Soviet submarine known only as K-129 plunged to the ocean floor off Hawaii. After weeks of searching, USSR officials gave up trying to find it. Several months later, the United States Navy launched a top-secret mission codenamed Operation Sand Dollar to find and photograph the wreck. It took just 3 weeks to locate K-129 at a depth of 16,000 feet. 2 years later, in 1970, high-ranking Defense Department and CIA officials embarked on a secret plan to recover the submerged vessel. Dubbed Project Aoran, it was the deepest salvage attempt ever made. At a grand total of around $800 million, around $4 billion in modern currency, it was also one of the most expensive and complicated Cold War intelligence undertakings. One of the reasons the expedition was so expensive was because a vessel was built specifically for the mission. As a cover-up, the government claimed that the ship, the Hughes Glomar Explorer, was built for mining. 2 torpedoes and several other pieces of equipment were recovered from K-129, including codebooks and other documents that the CIA was presumably thrilled to get their hands on. The team also recovered the remains of 6 Russian service members who'd gone down with the wreck and gave them a proper burial at sea with military honors. In 1975, Time magazine published an expose about the government's true intentions with the mission, despite the CIA's best efforts to squash the story. The agency remained tight-lipped even after the article came out. Several participants have given interviews over the years, but the exact details of what the mission uncovered are unclear to this day. Thanks for watching. Which one of these crazy stories was the most interesting to you? Let us know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time, bye!